On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we continue our preview of the NHL season for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Today, we are talking about Brayden Point, as well as asking ourselves, how long will the Steven Stamkos contract saga last for? We'll talk about all that and more, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we are continuing our player preview segments. Today, we are focusing in on Brayden Point, what kind of season he will have. I think that we kind of already know what kind of season he's going to have, so stay around for that, as well as talking about the Steven Stamkos saga that really, was one of those things where I said on the last episode when we did our player preview for Steven Stamkos, and I think that's a good way to start the episode. But before we get going, I got to remind you all that you could subscribe to Locked On Lightning wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form, as well as on our YouTube page. We just broke 700 subscribers the other day on YouTube, and when we get to 1,000, we will be doing a raffle. So the only way you could be entered into that raffle for a special prize is being subscribed to the YouTube channel. So with the Steven Stamkos stuff, I saw a comment on our YouTube page on the last video that we put up. And as I pull that up, I want to just say, like, it's one of those situations where, to be honest, I felt like this was something that was going to happen. I feel like really when it comes down to it is that this was something that, it's easier to say it now than what this, it's easier to say it now in hindsight. But really, when you look at the whole situation that happened, in terms of really stuff not happening and getting ahead of this, I really thought that they would have been a little bit more responsible in terms of being able to get something done during the summer, so this is not something that's going to be hanging over our heads for this foreseeable future. I think that in the end, this was something that, like I said, it's irresponsible. I saw some comments on the last video. One user XY, said that they will take care of this early in the season. So I guess the first 2 months, or probably the month of October. They thought that Stamkos is going to get 6.5 times 4. Ideally, I don't think that that's going to be something. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable giving Stamkos. I just don't feel comfortable giving him that kind of money, just because, the cap is going to rise in the upcoming years. But the problem is all with that is that we don't know when, by what dollar amount, and most likely in the foreseeable future, it might just be 1 million here, 1 million there. And Julian Brees-Boss, as we spoke on past episodes, he has to continue making this team better. And the only way he could do that is opening up more cap space. And when you look at this team from top to bottom, really what it comes down to is that you look at all these players, you look at their worth, and I'm not diminishing Steven Stamkos's worth, but you got to think years and ahead with this. He's one of the older players on this team, even though he's still in his early 30s. You got to look at his value now as opposed to when he's going to be 35, 36. I think once he gets to 35, 36, there's really not going to be a lot of value to get back in potential for return if you're going to trade him. But at the same time, at that point in time, if you have him on this team at 35, 36, chances are he's not going to be traded. So that's really not going to be a possibility at that point, which is why you kind of have to look at it now, where really is he have enough value where if the Lightning were to trade him at the trade deadline, and I'm sure if they don't rush on a deal, I really think that they could get some value back, or a couple of wingers, or a couple of forwards, or a forward and a defenseman from maybe a team that is on the fringe and kind of needs more scoring, or veteran, or whatever the case. Like an overachieving younger team probably would be the team that the Lightning would try to make a deal with if it came down to that, which I still don't think that's really going to happen. But at the same time, I still don't think that Stamkos and the Lightning are anywhere close on a deal that's going to make sense for both sides involved. So it's one of those things where, like I said on the last episode, I think really what's going to come down to is as we get closer to the season, and then as we see him start to play and kind of see where he's at physically and especially emotionally, because I'm sure you saw it when he was talking to the press about a week ago, to really just put it into plain words, he was pissed, and he's allowed to be pissed. I mean, he's given pretty much everything to this organization, but I'm sure at the end of the day, he knows that there's a business side to all this, and really he needs to understand that at the end of the day, and understand that this team is continuing to build and continuing to make themselves better, because they do have some holes that they need to plug, and unfortunately he might be the odd man out when it comes down to that. I saw another question. This was the question I was referring to before. This is from Danielle, or Daniel. I don't know how, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it or saying the wrong way. Danielle K9475. They asked, what's the value of a good captain and what they bring off the score sheet? How does trading Stammer impact our other top players and their performance? And then they went on to say that they don't disagree with anything said, but purely as a fan who's been watching Stamkos his entire career, they would be happy to trade a few tighter cap years and us potentially not doing well to see Stammer retire here, which I stated in that podcast, that episode. And thanks for the question, by the way. I always love answering questions of our listeners here. So if you strictly listen to us on audio form and you want a question to be answered on the show, go ahead. And if you have X, or if you just want to, if you just want a question asked, go ahead on our YouTube page, or you can message me at DenkyDank, DenkyDank on X, and I'll be more than happy to answer that question. So what's the value of a good captain and what they bring off the score sheet? First of all, I mean, I don't want to sound cliche, but really what it comes down to is that you can't really measure, how big of a contribution that is. You really can't quantify in dollar signs how valuable really that is to a team, especially a team that is making deep playoff runs on a yearly basis, that is going through adversity, as what we will probably see with this team this year, as they are more accustomed to going through adversity on a yearly basis. So I think that, yeah, with Stamkos, what if you were to trade him, how that impacts the other top line players and their performance. I mean, I'm not saying that if he gets traded, or if we've had a good idea as to kind of like what his impact is, as opposed to him not being around, because he's missed enough time on this team especially if you've been watching him his entire career. This team just has to find ways to win, and they're gonna have that same mindset if he were to be traded. I think that you still have a multitude of leaders on this team, to where, yeah, at the end of the day, you're missing the guy with the C on his sweater, but you still have a ton of leaders: Brayden Point, Nikita Kucherov, Victor Hedman, Eric Chernak, even Andrei Vasilevsky. you have more than a handful of players that are going to be able to assume that leadership role as to who might be next in line for that captain spot. I would have to say it's probably Hedman. Um, you know, Kucherov, I think that he's kind of, you do see him talk to his teammates on the ice and on the bench and stuff like that, but I think he's more of the guy where he leads through his play, and that's just how he is. I mean, I feel like that's a lot of Russian players. I mean, Vasilevsky, I feel, he's the goalie, so he has to be a little bit more vocal to really get to know where his players are as well, and what's on their minds and all that. It's a matter of positioning and kind of really knowing your players to a certain degree. So he kind of needs to know that. But that's not to say with this Lightning team that if 91 were to be traded, that it wasn't going to have any type of negative effect. I'm sure there's going to be a learning period if that were to happen. And I will say this, that I think that if Stamkos were to be traded, it would have already happened already. So that means that obviously, and I think that a lot of people agree that this will end in him being signed to a deal that, quite frankly, I think some people may not agree with. I think he'll get a little bit more just because he's so liked in the organization as well as in Tampa by the fans, and by his teammates too. I mean, I spoke about it. I think even if I didn't speak about it in full, I definitely alluded to it on the last episode, how really it's just a bad look to kind of be in this little of a I guess say a back and forth with your captain, and then him to kind of come out and show that he's visibly upset about it. It's just not a good look, and it's really not something that needs to happen before the season. I think that really at the end of the day, like I said to start off the episode, I think that really it was slightly irresponsible to not get something done, because instead of us now talking about the beginning of the season and talking about certain players and the schedule and all that to really give more light and excitement around that, we're here talking about the best player in franchise history, now in a little bit of a dispute with your GM. And it's never a nice situation where you have a back and forth of deliberation over dollar figures. So hopefully they get something done. Hopefully they get something done soon, and we could just move along, and hopefully no feelings are hurt, even though I find that very, very impossible to do, just because I feel like no one ever walks away from these situations ever 100% happy. So like I said, as always, we will keep an eye on that if and when there is some sort of development in this contract dispute or extension dispute, if you really want to talk about it that way. So, and I hope to the people who had questions, especially the one who actually wrote a question under the last video, I hope I was able to answer the question in full for you, and be able to clarify some things as well. So let me know if not, and we'll talk about it on the next episode as well. So later on, or coming up, we'll be talking about Brayden Point, looking back on his past season as well as looking forward to this upcoming season. What are the expectations? What kind of player do we expect him to be this year as well, or maybe even grow into another form of himself? We'll talk about all that and more. But first, I want to talk about one of our sponsors today, and that's our friends over at Jase Medical. Now, listen, Jase Medical is one of our newest sponsors, but I love them already because they provide 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. Now, everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are just not hoping that you have access to medication in emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. So don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using my code Locked On at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. So I want to thank everyone, as always, if you haven't already done so, for making us your first listen of the day, and as well as subscribing. So go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Like I said, we are available wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're available on Instagram, Twitter as well. And yeah, we just got done talking about the Steven Stamkos thing. I think we're going on a week, 2 weeks, maybe. Yeah, 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks on him kind of talking about it and it becoming a thing. And I'm already tired of it. Like I said, I would rather prefer with us now 15 days away from opening night just to be talking about some of the players, or really all the players that will be contributing to this team. And one of them, that we'll be talking about today is Brayden Point. We're doing his preview today. And if you haven't already done so, please go listen or watch the other previews that we have done thus far. If you're following us on YouTube, we have a whole playlist of them. So don't forget and go ahead and watch there. So it's all organized for you. So Brayden Point, just to look back on his previous season, 82 games played, 51 goals, 95 points. Unfortunately, there was really no hope for him to have any really kind of consideration for the MVP, just because Connor McDavid was just an absolute beast last year. He did finish third in the Bing, so I guess that's good. No offense to anybody, but I just don't view the Lady Bing Award as an award. It's just kind of weird that they have an award for being a nice guy in a sport that is highly violent, which I guess makes sense. But at the same time, I mean, that's not the focus of the game. But Brayden Point, career high in goals as well as a career high in points last year. Only the second time in his career that he hit the 90-point mark, and the first time was during the 18-19 season. Only the second time that he has hit the 82-game mark or even the 80-game mark in his career, and the last time that was during the 17-18 season. And I spoke about it really leading up to last year as well. We've seen this progression from Brayden Point over the last couple of years, but progression where you're really happy, you're really nervously excited to see kind of like what the finished product is, just because, as we all know, if you're new to the party, if you are hopping on the Lightning bandwagon or whatnot, he's dealt with quite a few injuries in his career. But when he's gotten to the playoffs, he looks like one of the greatest players in the league. I think really Brayden Point doesn't get enough credit just because of players like Connor McDavid. But even on this team, I mean, when people look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, they look at Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos, Andre Vasilevsky. And I've spoken about it on this podcast where once we get to the playoffs, everyone's like, holy crap, where did this Brayden Point guy come from? He's absolutely killing us tonight. And us Lightning fans are like, well, he's been here all year. You just haven't noticed him. He's been doing this all year. And, we just got done talking about leaders. If Stamkos were to leave Tampa Bay, who would kind of assume those roles? Brayden Point's right up there. You saw it this year, and, you've seen it in spots over the last couple of years, but I think this year was a little bit different considering just how just well he's played. And you could see the added confidence that he has been playing with, that really he is one of the top leaders on this team. And I love watching him play. I love seeing him progress as the season goes on. And I've always said, if the guy stays healthy, he's one of the best in the league. And this year, I'm hoping that even though he's just coming off a 50 goal, almost nearly 100-point season, I'm expecting him to expand on that. And what does that mean exactly in stats? Well, first of all, I'm expecting him to play 82 games this year. I think that he's at the point in his career where really the conditioning, he's got it down pat. He knows what he needs to work on. He knows what really he needs to kind of just do maintenance on his body, and at the same time, he knows what areas of his game to work on. And I think that really, when you look at his game, he really beats a lot of people with his in front net presence. He does a very good job, especially when we may chalk this up to Kucherov as well, but he does a very good job of kind of sneaking down to the low slot area, and a lot of that also has to do playing, like I said, on the same line as Nikita Kucherov, but he does a very good job of setting himself up for opportunities. And having said that, I would like to see that assist number kind of go up, which is, it's not exactly an easy thing to do, especially if you want to maintain that 45 to 50 goal range. I would really like to see him kind of get around 50 goals this year, and eclipse that 100-point mark for the season. Because I think if he's doing that, obviously that means that he's spreading the puck around. A lot of players on this team benefit hugely when guys like Kucherov, and we spoke about it on the Kucherov preview as well. When guys like that are spreading the puck around and they're still kind of getting their numbers, that means that everybody else on the team is doing very well. And that's what I would love to see, especially if John Cooper is eventually going to decide and give playing time on the first line to Brandon Hagel. I'm like, I can't talk today, but that'd be really, really nice to see, because especially on that first line, with Hagel, Point, and Cooch, that's a Lightning fan's best case scenario, in my opinion. I think that, especially after the season Hagel had, and then you got Point getting 50 goals and close to maybe 50 assists, you're in pretty good shape, because we all know that Nikita Kucherov is going to get his numbers. So I'm not really entirely worried about him. But like I stress with Point all the time, it's staying healthy, and it's staying healthy, because at this point, what you see is what you kind of get. I would expect him to just, if he could stay on the ice, this team is going to be fine. And that goes for really every player on this team. As long as they get going early on in games and don't kind of they don't come into games just kind of asleep at the wheel, and then they wake up late in the second period and they're down by 2 goals. And the worst thing, and I said this all through last season, is that really the downfall of this team was really just not getting things started, not getting control of games. And then now we're sitting here late in the second period, and you kind of just decide to start playing, which is really inexcusable, which is a whole another thing that we'll be talking about as we get closer to the season. And I'm very curious to see, to combat that, what kind of style we're going to see from this team, and how the players like Point and Cooch and Hagel and Stamkos and Nick Paul and Sorelli, list goes on, how those guys, especially on the forward lines, are able to not only go out with that momentum and really take control of the game early on, but how to combat the counter offense that we will see from other teams. But it all starts from the top, and it all starts with guys like Brayden Point. So let me know in the comments below what you think about that, what kind of season is he going to have. Like I said, I firmly believe we're going to see possibly, if not a 50-goal season, 100-point season, but at least something similar to along the lines for those numbers. So let me know in the comments below on our YouTube page, as well as on X, formerly known as Twitter. And you could reach me at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK, or you could reach out to the show at LO_Lightning on Twitter, or LOCKEDON_Lightning on Instagram. So we'll wrap things up in just a bit, but first I want to talk about our last sponsors of the day, and that's our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, in case you haven't heard, FanDuel Sportsbook is the number one sportsbook in America right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200, 200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get on the action. The NFL season's in full swing, and you could get in on the wide range of betting options, including the spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. So wrapping things up on the show, let me know in the comments below what you think. I know there's going to be some people that are going to have very differing opinions about how I evaluate some of these players. It was pointed out to me the other day during the Stamkos. I think it was about the it was about the Stamkos episode. Somebody actually took the time, which was interesting, to post the link to the show and then on Instagram and tag the show into it, and then just, I guess, like, trash. I didn't really read it. I just saw, like, someone showed me the notification. I looked at it for a second and went about my day, but whatever. Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to open up a dialogue with me, go ahead. Like I said, contact the show, contact me, and would love to hear. If you guys want to send like an audio, we'll definitely put it in the episode and I could answer it. It's almost like a indirect way of calling the show. So if you want to do that, we'll definitely get the audio. So I guess record yourself on the voice memo on your phones, send it in. The only thing I ask is no profanity, please. We won't post it. So definitely don't do that. But yeah, we'll continue our player previews segment as the season comes ever so closer. Like I said, only 15 days away from that October 10th opening night against the Nashville Predators. So you definitely don't want to miss that. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.